explain it to you a little later. And it's a good institutional structure within the United States and increasingly the world for communicating. I think you might find it interesting. But it's so good to see you. Thanks for the stuff over the weekend, and I'm really looking forward to finding out more. And your tape is beautiful, the DVD, and welcome.
Thank you.
And welcome to you in the audience. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program the guest who is billed here on the title and so forth as Sofia of 9/11 Mysteries. And the 9/11 Mysteries does refer to the content of a DVD that she's put together that is masterfully done, if I may say so at the very outset. And it's a pleasure to welcome her to the program. And Sofia, welcome very, very much.
Thank you, Harold.
As I suggested to you as we began, we like to just begin with you introducing yourself a little bit in a brief way, the background, born and raised, that sort of thing. And I wonder if maybe you could do that, and then we could go into a discussion about filmmaking, its role, communication, 9/11 issues, and so forth. But if you would, your own background, please.
Well, I have never made a film before, and I did travel the world as a child and was lucky enough to see many different cultures from different perspectives. When I decided to make this movie, I wasn't really doing it as a filmmaker or a seasoned filmmaker of any kind. I had training as a writer. I've written a novel or two. I have co-authored some books, worked as a ghost writer and book doctor, which is sort of like an editor. Yes. When people write a novel or a manuscript and they try to sell it and they can't get representation for it, they don't know what's wrong with it exactly, they go to somebody else to get an opinion and get some direction as to how to rework their book. And so there was a huge number of book doctors that had kind of mushroomed when traditional publishing companies, editors became mainly acquisitions editors and not so much developmental editors. They were into acquiring properties.
Very interesting,
So then book doctors were an independent kind of entity that received referrals from publishing houses or agents, and then also word of mouth.
Very interesting. That's very interesting indeed,
So my training was, I had taught myself to write screenplays. I had one novel that I tried very hard to sell, and it was extremely problematic, pretty much put me in the poorhouse. And it's now going to come out.
Oh, good.
Since I have an audience, thanks to this movie, I have sent it around to a few people to read, and they're very interested in getting the book, getting the book out.
Is that a novel?
It's a novel. It's a thriller called The White Magician.
Now this you wrote or you doctored? You wrote it?
I wrote it, yes. And so I will be releasing it later this year.
Wonderful.
As a sort, not as a follow-up to 9/11 Mysteries, but see, my main interest in all this is not so much the politics or the science, it's the metaphysics. How are we going to take back the world? We're not going to do it by force. We don't have guns. We don't have
I don't have a
soldiers.
Gun. Do you have a gun?
We don't know.
Not even a Gatling gun.
We can't march anywhere and tell people to stop doing what they're doing.
I do, from my experience in the Army. I know how to drive a tank. I had to go. I was drafted in the United States Army. I learned how to drive an M48 tank.
Well, you'll drive the tanks.
Okay, and you write the book. Okay, I wonder if I could. You said you traveled around the world. Your family was it a business thing, a military family that brought you around the world?
I'm going to really go into, but I had the opportunity to see the world as a child and see that different cultures thought in different ways.
But was the family involved in things that moved you around the world? As an infant you were talking even?
No,
when
as
you
a
were
child.
As a child?
Yes.
And so the family was moving around. That's an unusual kind of thing. Usually was that...
Some people do it.
Yeah, but it wasn't your family was military?
We're going to move on, Harold.
Oh, okay. Okay, fine. You don't want to talk about that. Okay, fine. But you had the opportunity to have a cross-cultural feeling for the world, and that's a really very important kind of lesson and state of consciousness in a globalizing world,
Because it makes you an observer primarily. And when you learn to observe, you can really then create from observations.
Yes.
You're not creating from a belief system.
Right, or abstract,
one of the problems we have in trying to get the 9/11 information across to people is that we're fighting their belief systems.
Or narrative. A narrative that they put out, and they build all kinds of political things
but the
upon that
person
narrative.
themselves that I'm trying to approach with this whole new set of facts about 9/11,
okay,
that person sometimes is resistant because they can't believe
Right.
that the alternative version could have even been possible, that such an event could have been planned.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a terror attack in the classic sense, you
Yeah.
know? So 9/11 Mysteries was fashioned, number one, to start penetrating the mainstream. We had a lot of 9/11 movies, videos that were made kind of by people who weren't professional at this. And I decided that I would hire and develop people to work with so that I could put out a product that was professional, that was studio style, that was not going to be dismissed because it was crude, and that wasn't...
Or in your face kind
yes,
of thing. Yeah.
imbued with agenda. That's the other thing.
Imbued with agenda. Yeah,
Yes.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
So it's very important, if you're going to invite somebody to consider a new angle on something.
A whole paradigm, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's just start with a new angle.
Okay.
If you berate them for not already knowing this, if you smack them on the head with a frying pan, proverbial, they're not going to be receptive to
Not
what
usually.
you have to say.
And yet people do think that's the way to do it, but it isn't really.
Right.
It's more subtle.
You have to invite them. And I found that to ask people questions is better than to give them the answers. If you ask them enough questions and you present enough material that they can then watch and cogitate on, they will start coming up with answers themselves.
Yeah.
You want to allow people to make their own conclusions.
Most people, if you just think about it in a way, probably most people are imbued, I don't know if it's part of the genetic code or something, are much more comfortable in a situation where they're in that kind of a role in the world, aren't they? Most people don't like to be hit upside the head with a 2x4.
No.
I
They
think.
don't like to be shocked, and they
Right.
don't like to be frightened,
Right.
and they don't like to be pushed out of where they were just very comfortable a minute ago.
That's the thing. When Mr. Galileo and Copernicus came along and told the world that we were not the center of the universe, Hieronymus Bosch painted some paintings. It was very, very disruptive to people's sense of consciousness and place in the universe.
Right.
Very upsetting. And the Catholic Church only just let Copernicus or Galileo off the hook about 10 years ago for having brought up that idea that was a whole new way in which the universe is constructed. It was very, very upsetting. People are set in their ways by and large, so that's another way of thinking about human consciousness. Although I was thinking of it more from a positive perspective of inviting people to consider something is different than ordering them to do it, because
Right.
I think most people have had enough of an authoritarian a world organized along authoritarian lines, their
Right.
institutional structures. Don't you know what I mean?
Well, certainly,
yeah.
but if left to themselves,
Uh-huh.
people are a little bit lazy as well, you know. It's easier to be entertained than it is to study. So
Yeah.
in trying to translate the 9/11 information, we have had to resort to forms of entertainment. So another necessity in the making of this movie was that it have a narrative arc, a story arc to it, a beginning, a middle, and an end.
I think that's the way so much is passed on, is it not?
Sure.
In a narrative form. I'm happy to hear that your novel, it's a novel. And I spoke to you on the telephone the other day, we were setting this up, and I saw Norman Mailer, and he said the most creative way, or the most effective way in order to convey reality is through the novel, rather than through the hard reporting of facts, ma'am, kind of thing, like much of the writing does, or hitting them. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
To get at the reality, because the reality is really nuanced. And you can get at that through the novel, which creates very often our great narratives by which we live and hang information in our mind, I think. Yeah?
Well, the novel that I will hopefully put out later this year it really has nothing to do with 9/11.
No, I know,
So
yeah.
it's reading novels is an exercise in abstract thought.
Okay.
And the reading of literary fiction is becoming less popular because one has to hold disparate pieces of information in one's head in order to form the shape of the story. And as a novelist gives you the story, he's selecting, or she is, they're selecting what pieces to tell you when. And your job as the reader is to hold all of this in your mind, and it's not comfortable at first.
Yeah.
And eventually you'll reach a point, in screenwriting they call it the first plot point, where you can, now you know what this story is going to be about. Now you're engaged. Now you're in the terrain of the story.
Yeah.
And you want to keep going.
Agatha Christie.
Yes.
Will draw you into the mystery.
Right.
And so forth. But
but to do this with science, to do this in a documentary, to get people grabbed enough that they're going to stay with this.
Yeah, to make it like a mystery.
Right.
We have something called 9/11 Mysteries would be a good idea.
Yes. Yes.
Which you've, of course, come up with. I'm interested in that. You've done screenwriting.
Yes.
I told you also in our conversation I'd met Alexandria Fuller. She's a writer from South Zimbabwe. The Los Angeles Times said she was one of the best writers of the English language in the last decade. And I did a program with her, and she said at one point that she thought all writing should be cinematographic. Screenplay. Have you done a lot? Is it different writing novel, let's just say, apart from what you did for 9/11 Mysteries, but and a screenplay? Because you've got the multimedia context, which is becoming more and more part of the human condition and the situation in which we work. So that the world is going in a certain sense, and youth seems to be going toward in favoring multimedia because it's now available to us in a way that historically it hasn't been.
Well, there's visual media and multimedia. A screenplay is the bare bones of a movie, and it has to be visual in its concept, but it isn't a visual thing by itself.
No, but if you're setting it, you've got the setting. It's like I use an example, if I could. This is interesting to me, and bear with me. Mr. Michener does at the beginning of Hawaii, takes 8 pages of beautiful literature to describe a headland, a person standing at a headland, and the sun is in the sky, and the wind is caressing his face, and the sun, and all these multisensorial perception. It takes 8 pages to describe that situation, set the scene, as it were, and a very rich literature and so forth, that if you were standing there, you would experience in life, or if you were standing on that headland, you would experience all at once and multisensorially. And increasingly we're able to perceive things or have a presentation that presents things multisensorially, so that the consciousness and the perceptual mode is moving in that direction away from a linear perception that has been the case with when we only more or less had print and then a few paintings by some of our great artists and so forth to represent the media context or the mediated context of narrative development. Do you understand what I'm saying? Multimedia is becoming more important.
Yes.
And you're right there in a certain sense, having worked in both. Did you do much writing of screenplays and so forth? Or
I wrote 3.
You did?
And then I worked on others with other. Actually, I probably wrote more than 3, but 3 that I believe are decent.
Was that done for the industry or done in an avant-garde way, or?
No, it was an effort to survive. I adapted a couple of my, well, one novel, the one that I'm bringing out this fall.
Congratulations on
well,
that.
Well, it's me, you know.
Yeah, right.
It's not like anybody huge has decided to publish it. But
Not
now
yet
that I
huge.
have a little bit of a following, I'm in a better position to do it myself and see what happens.
And to have them respect the work that had been ignored in the past.
Well, actually, it was
or overlooked.
No. The novel was very popular with some major publishing houses.
It was?
Yeah. But
why did they not bring it out?
Nobody knows. It's been rejected 50 times.
Oh, pink
it's
slip row.
Yeah. Embarrassment to me, actually.
Yeah.
But I'm proud of this novel because it continues to, be solid. I reread it recently, and I thought this wasn't that bad, considering how fast I wrote it. I wrote it, I think, in something like a month or so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was
great. All in one stream of consciousness, like, or?
Almost.
Really?
It's bizarre.
That's like the legend is that Kerouac did On the Road, was all on one piece of paper, one scroll of paper, all in I think he took a little
Yeah.
longer than that in real terms, but that's the legend anyway, yeah.
Well, then I repaired it. I made some adjustments. I myself...
You did doctoring of it.
I went to a book doctor.
You went to another person
yes.
for that. You
Oh,
did.
You have to.
You do.
You can't doctor your own books.
It's important to have that doctor be pretty well honed to your own consciousness.
I mean, would
think?
you try to take your appendix out yourself?
No.
Okay.
No, I definitely would. And I would never want to live in a time without anesthetic, too. I'd add that. I mean, you know, that kind of thing. That's just a sideline. And everything. And that's all really very, very interesting. So you were creatively involved in that sort of thing. And then have you been throughout your adult life in any particularly political or?
No.
No.
In fact, I really didn't like politics because here's the thing. Our media doesn't report things fully, and that has been the case for a very long time. There's a selective reporting of certain overt occurrences in the news, but covert things are not reported, or other things are not reported and kept covert. So if you're the public and you learn about an event like 9/11 and it comes out of nowhere and it doesn't seem to have any real precedent or any good reason, and they tell you, well, it's Arabs and they hate our lives, and you're
our
thinking,
freedom, they hate our freedom.
well,
yeah.
everything.
Yeah, that's part of a
and
narrative.
it doesn't
yeah.
make sense. So if enough of these things appear in the news that are missing all this background and nothing adds up, what happens?
Particularly when you realize that most all of reality is in that covert realm.
Exactly.
I
So
mean,
you
most
lose-
everything's invisible. 99% of everything is just invisible
Right,
to our
but-
consciousness.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but we're not talking about that
Yeah,
right
okay,
now. We're
yeah,
talking about the
okay.
deliberate withholding
Oh, yeah.
of critical pieces of information from the American public that
Oh.
constitute history and news.
Yeah.
So then the news doesn't make any sense. So
Good.
that
Yeah.
causes you to develop a distaste
Yeah.
for the news, right?
Well, yeah, you get the sound bites and that, yeah, that kind of thing.
So-
Goebbels was a great propagandist, wasn't he, in the Hitler's Germany?
Right. People are
Yeah.
given simple sound bites. They say, all right, well, if that's supposed to make sense, then fine. But they don't have an integral curiosity or interest in world affairs when those affairs are not responsibly reported to them. So that is the case with many Americans today, and that was the case with me regarding 9/11. And then I happened to hear from a friend who knew a pilot. He was a senior captain for a major U.S. airline. And on the day of 9/11, 2001, he was standing in front of the TV and he was watching the footage of the plane hitting the South Tower, because that was the footage they replayed.
Over and over,
he
yeah.
kept saying, I don't know who's flying those planes. He said, he said, you have no idea how hard it is to fly a plane into a building like that. And then he said, I don't think I could do it with all my experience. And my friend told me this, and I said, what?
Yeah.
Why would he say that?
Yeah,
because
right.
you and I imagine taking our car and driving it into a tree,
Right.
which wouldn't be hard if we could overcome the psychological
that's right.
impediment, you know. But here's a very competent captain
Yeah.
of a major airline
Yeah.
who has flown Boeing
Flying
for
one of
30
those
years.
large planes
Yeah,
that
and
was
he
purported.
says he couldn't
yeah.
do it. So I started to look into this, and I heard something that the planes might have been remotely controlled, and I thought, well, that's very interesting. And then I started to hear that the towers might have been filled with explosives, and I did a little more inquiry, and I was able to obtain a copy of Painful Deceptions, which is one of the early 9/11 videos by Eric Hufschmid. And I actually got this video from someone who knew him. So after I watched it, I asked for his number from this person. I called him, and I made him a little flash movie, Macromedia Flash. It's
You had developed some filmic skills and so forth, or you just did it?
This was just a flash movie. It was on the internet. It went global. It was 3 minutes long. It was something about, I think it was called 9/11 Questions or something like that.
You made the film, the 3-minute film.
It's a flash file. I directed
What is a flash
it.
file?
Macromedia Flash is it's like video, but it's a much smaller file, and it can be more easily handled by computers. So a lot of what you view on the internet is in Flash or streaming Flash.
That's right. I think YouTube goes through
Yes.
Flash. But you constructed this pieces of footage from where, and where
They
did
were
you get
just
the
mainly still pictures.
still pictures?
But I worked
okay.
with Eric Hufschmid on creating a 3-minute little mini movie that could be sent around the internet.
Yeah.
And that happened.
And what was the content of the movie?
It was about 9/11.
Yeah, but what aspect of it?
All the questions about 9/11. How could these buildings come down in this time? You know,
You had visual images? What
Yeah.
visual images did
we
you
used
have?
still photos. That's all.
Still photos
Yeah.
and then a
Of
narrative?
the towers.
And
no,
a narrative?
We
No.
put text.
Uh-huh.
Flash was, we didn't do audio except in music. We did
Okay.
background music. But anyway,
Mhm.
just take my word for it. It was a 3-minute mini movie asking a lot of questions about 9/11, and it flew around the internet. It went global that winter.
Mm-hmm.
And
What winter was that? Can you remember?
I think it was, I must have done this in 2004.
2004. Okay.
So
Yeah,
it was
you
the
were,
winter of 2004, 2005.
and you were becoming. Would it be fair to say you were becoming skeptical?
Oh, I was already
You were.
completely skeptical.
Can you remember when you first became skeptical? Because you were coming away. You weren't coming at it from a life of
Right.
political
No,
agenda and
no.
political concern.
So
You were a citizen,
the
a creative
skepticism
citizen. Yeah.
started in, I would say, early 2004.
Okay. Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah. Had David Ray Griffin put out his Pearl Harbor and stuff then? I don't know. I think that.
I think he did that around that time. No, actually, David Griffin met Eric Hufschmid,
Mm-hmm.
and David had already woken up to this, and then when he met Eric, Eric has written a beautiful book, Painful Questions.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And he's one of the early researchers.
Yeah.
And Griffin used material from that book, I believe, and that gave his new Pearl Harbor a whole new kind of fullness.
He has Dave Ray Griffin. He has impeccable credentials, theologian, a scholar of the highest order, and so forth. And he's really good. People picked up on that in a way. There had been I don't want to get off on a tangent, but the idea of a conspiracy, that kind of thing. And there have been people who were very incensed about the assassination of President Kennedy and all kinds of conspiracy things, that there's a cover-up, the people who think we didn't go to the moon, that kind of thing. There's been that kind. Were you of a skeptical nature in terms of the things we were being told by our authority figures and our media mavens, as it were, as you came up to this after post-9/11 consciousness?
Yes, then I started, I won't use the word conspiracies because I think it's already a terribly tainted word. It's an unfortunate word now.
It's a word in which they can hang on their own petard, or try to hang people on their own petard. Yeah.
I would say there have been many deceptions, major deceptions, and people have gone along with them because they have been poorly informed. There's very little background. So you're given a situation and you're given a flimsy reason for it, and because you don't have much else to go on, you say, all right, well, that had to be. You know, Lee Oswald, well, fine. When it doesn't work, it doesn't add up.
Or we'd come out of Vietnam with the Tonkin Resolution, and finally they said after all those years and all those loss of life that we made a mistake. People, no authority figure, institutions want to say they made a mistake because everyone that represents some political entity or business or something wants to think that they represent legitimacy in a historical context. And they want that to get across to the people, if only to gain market share.
So now, maybe we should show a segment of
if you
this
want
movie.
now, sure, you have a segment, and let's talk a little bit, because you came up to that, and you came, because we got a clip that we want to show from 9/11 Mysteries, your current thing. Maybe we could talk, that was a little bit more about how you developed to where you developed this. You did this flash file, and that got around, and then you went right into the work that ended and culminated in your DVD that is becoming widespread now and actually finding its way into the mainstream.
Yes, it's going to
of
television.
World consciousness. Yeah.
We've had
so
TV
maybe we could talk a little about
selling.
that before we show the clip, if you don't mind. What is 9/11 Mysteries? And maybe we could just talk a little bit of it, and then we'll show a clip after we've sort of, in a sense, set it up.
9/11 Mysteries started as a live presentation in Southern California.
Yeah.
It was video evidence that we got from the internet and other documentaries on this sort of same subject. We were highlighting points that really defied the official story.
Yeah.
And we showed video, and my friend Brad and I stood at either end of the screen, and we gave live commentary, narrated commentary live on what the public was seeing. And we had written out a script. The script contained 4 segments. It had demolitions, hijackers and planes, war games, and who benefits.
Okay.
So we did this live show, which was about 2 hours, and audiences were left quite shaken.
Did you develop that script prior to going to work on putting images together, or how did that come about? I know it's available on one of your sites. The whole script is PDF and it's available.
That's the script to 9/11 Mysteries.
Yeah.
The film.
Yeah.
But the film, the movie that you saw is the DVD that was born out of the live show.
I see.
Only part 1.
I see. So you had developed that first. I see. And you presented that to audiences or something with a slideshow, or what? With what?
Video evidence.
Video evidence, and then you would narrate it. I see. And
narrate commentary.
And then that led to the creation of the DVD film that's getting around so much, and it's done in a way that is not in-your-face pie, but it's one that is going to invite people to consider rather than try and cram it down their throat, if I'm not mistaken. And was that the same with your presentation that preceded the 9/11 Mysteries tape or DVD?
Yes, the presentation was very neutral, very
and
factual.
And it developed from there. Do you put your script together first? Is that the way you put the 9/11 Mysteries together?
Yeah.
And the one that's available on the internet, it'll give the script that is done for it.
Yeah, I wrote the script, and the script went through, revisions and changes and additions.
Did it take you a long time to develop that? Was it like developing in a certain, it would be like a teleplay, or a screenplay or something like that? It was like developing that. It was cinematographic. You were thinking of that. And did you have your sources arranged? Did you know your visual sources and sound sources as you put that script together? Or how did that all come together? How did it work?
I've learned that a weak documentary is driven by pictures.
Yeah, a weak documentary?
A weak documentary.
Okay.
And the script is secondary. I've learned that a strong documentary is driven by the script.
Really?
And the pictures are secondary.
That's interesting.
In this case, the pictures had to substantiate and support and illustrate what was being said in the script. But when you watch a lot of the stuff on television, History Channel, The Underwater World of Jacques Cousteau, it really has to do with imagery and images that is being supported by a narration.
That's right. And some of the nature stuff.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Absolutely staggering,
but it's not. In a political documentary, in order to make real impact, it can't be driven by pictures. It has to be driven by content.
What proportion would you say, if you in a rough ballpark way, is content of the words or the narration and then the images, and then you got the score to contend with? That's also important. Right?
Well, that drives the emotion.
Well, the overall communication of narrative and the emotional content and the emotional considerations is a large part of what you want to deal with. And it seems to me, if you're doing creating a narrative or something, or inviting people rather than hitting them over the head like a lesson in Latin. What percentage it's interesting you said that. I find that the images are not that important in your view in terms of a good documentary that has
it depends. As I said, this is a political documentary, so the images have to, and it's also scientific, so the images have to substantiate and illustrate what I'm saying.
Right.
So they're important. But really the content is the driver, is the engine.
Yeah. And the content of your so we're coming up now to 9/11 Mysteries, which is getting wide distribution now, and in many mainstream venues, which is very interesting.
Well, it's
itself.
in the retail stores now, the chain stores in the U.S., Borders, Walmart, even Barnes & Noble, Target.
Walmart sells your DVD?
Should be, yeah.
Oh, that's pretty good, huh? And it's going around the world then, in a way. And it seems to be getting a wide audience where a lot of the rock 'em, sock 'em, hit 'em hard with the facts kind of thing have gone into an underground kind of context, as opposed to the film, the success of the film of yours, which is somewhat different. I wouldn't say
that. I mean, I don't consider that 9/11 Mysteries really is competing against anything else. There was a need for one product, at least, that could reach mainstream people.
Mainstream, okay, that's mainstream.
And then once you are open to the subject, people usually want to acquire more videos, see more videos.
Yeah.
So this is a very unique situation because people start amassing a library. They want 9/11 Mysteries, Loose Change, Barry Zwicker's The Great Conspiracy. They want the David Ray Griffin videos. They want to see the Jones lectures. They want to see Improbable Collapse.
Stephen Jones and Alex Jones.
Yes.
Yeah.
They want to see everything. They want to start buying everything. The collection never stops.
Right. That's the way it is. If somebody is really interested in what they're doing, they will do it on their, like that thing you said began this whole thing with is you invite them to consider it, and then what they're doing is they're coming at it from their own volition and their own curiosity, and human consciousness has a tremendous capability for curiosity and acquisition of information and understanding if it's able to develop it on its own terms rather than having it crammed down their throat.
Right.
That's a big important issue that I think probably a lot of people in the ad industry knows. They know how to manipulate those things and everything. But, okay, you're doing that, and, okay, that's, I'm sorry, it's just so many things it gives me to talk about. And I viewed the film. You gave it the other night, that 9/11, and it's so well done and so forth. The narration is yourself? You were narrating? Did you have to modulate your voice and so on?
No.
No, you just spoke in your own normal voice? You didn't take diction lessons or anything like that to try and... You know, I'm making fun in a certain sense, but it was very well. It was very calm and very well done, the narration.
Thank you.
You didn't consider getting a professional for that?
No, because the conventional narration style is really one of sending the listener into a passive, acquiescent state, into a kind of trance.
You think it is?
Oh, absolutely. That's how these documentaries
Even if it's Charles
work.
Lawton?
I don't know Charles Lawton.
You don't know Charles Lawton?
But anyway, we wanted a different voice.
Okay.
And we wanted a voice that would be calm, as you said, maybe even gentle. I don't know. It just seemed right that I do it, and I did it, and
well, it worked.
Yeah, people like it.
One good test of an attempt is does it work, and it seems that it does work with you. And when did it come out first? The 9/11 Mysteries, the one we're going to take a little look at now.
Well, there have been updates. This is the new update, April 2006.
When did the original come out?
2007. September 2006.
2006. So it's been out a couple of years, and you've done updates?
No. It has been out 1 year.
1 year, I'm sorry. And it's come out like that, and you've done changes?
Yeah.
Major changes or minor changes?
There have been little pieces of evidence that have emerged that seemed important to include. So I made some revisions. It's probably around 10 minutes of difference now scattered throughout the video. But it's really not substantially different.
It's not substantially different.
No.
I think.
It's
and then, do you have auxiliary clips or something on the DVD for expanding on?
No.
No, you don't have that. No. Have you thought about doing that?
I really don't want to do that.
Okay. Okay, well, listen, you said about 10 minutes ago that we could show a clip, and I thought it was a good idea. And the trouble is, I could talk to you about 15 hours about the implications of all these things, and we shouldn't take up all that time. But it's out now, and it's getting a wide distribution in mainstream, or that's a broader audience.
No, it isn't getting wide mainstream distribution. It's starting to be available to the mainstream.
Well, that is.
It's gotten wide distribution among the 9/11 skeptics community.
Yeah.
And it's also being heavily bootlegged and copied. You know, this is part of the spirit of it all.
Yeah.
And I do hope that people who burn it will remember that it was a very expensive project for me to fund personally. I'm not underwritten by studios, and there's no big investor here.
You don't have a big CIA contract.
No.
No, they don't get any of that big Defense Department money or those billions of dollars that were sent to Iraq in $100 bills and so forth. You didn't. Okay, you didn't do that. I'm just joking in a way.
I realize.
Okay, so you have that, and we're going to show a clip. We got one. Maybe you could tell a specific clip that we're going to show from your DVD.
We're going to see Chapter 6. I left the chapters in it. The chapters were originally there as kind of markers just for me and my video editors.
Yeah.
But I decided pretty much toward the end, let's just leave the chapters in place and let people find parts of the movie that they want to revisit or learn. It's a movie that bears rewatching.
Good. Yeah. Okay, so I guess they're running it now. Okay, could you pipe it in here? Hello? Oh, here it comes. Here it comes.
What do falling buildings look like?
What do demolitions look like? We are seeing typical implosions, characterized by gutting a building's base and then pulling it into itself. Computer-controlled sequencing fires the explosives in a rapid wave. Notice the jets of shooting concrete, the flashes, the pops, the caving of the buildings as they fall into their footprint, the tremendous, billowing clouds of dust. Now let's look at the collapse of the Twin Towers. We are seeing explosions rather than implosions, a first in demolition history. A sequenced rumble becomes a roar as debris is thrown outward. The damage is not contained. Even the windows are blown from neighborhood buildings. What kind of energy enabled this? Would fire hurl metal and concrete sideways into the air? Here, a 600,000-pound chunk of steel, twice the weight of a Boeing airliner, was flung 400 feet, wedging itself deep into 3 World Financial Center on Vesey Street. A FEMA photographer taking pictures of Ground Zero wondered why so many steel beams were jutting from neighborhood buildings. Watt shot pieces of the towers all the way across the street. In April 2006, New Yorkers were distressed to learn that bone fragments, human remains from 9/11, had been found on the roof of the nearby Deutsche Bank building.
How in God's name did those fragments get there?
It surprised me that there was still bone fragments or human remains that had not been discovered.
How is it possible that after 5 years they're finally looking on the rooftops of the Deutsche building? I mean, that's crazy.
And bone fragments less than a centimeter long. How could they be so small? So much to be explained. Why did the South Tower fall first when it was the second tower to be hit? Watch the top of Tower 2 leaning outward, about to topple. Then suddenly, it disintegrates in midair. What causes this giant slab of steel and concrete to turn into dust before our eyes? Watch both buildings collapsing straight down, directly into the path of most resistance, which is all the floors and all the mass of the building itself. The World Trade Center towers came down in approximately 10 seconds. Seismic data from Columbia University puts the North Tower collapse at about 8 seconds and the South Tower at approximately 10. Lynn Simpson, a survivor from the 89th floor of the North Tower, describes the site.
And I saw the Trade Center literally collapse in upon itself floor by floor by floor, and it took seconds for it to happen. It was a massive building, and it just pancaked.
10 seconds. These are 110-story buildings coming to Earth at near free-fall speed, the rate at which an object drops through air. The lower floors would need to give way completely as the floors above them fell. Can a person walk through a closed door as quickly and smoothly as one that is open? A 10-second collapse means the upper floors encountered no resistance from the undamaged floors beneath them. Watch the demolition wave rushing straight down.
Here the South Tower is half its original height, but wreckage from the upper collapse has not yet fallen this far. We are watching a demolition moving faster than gravity itself, a building bursting into powder from top to bottom. Here, the core of the North Tower finally gives up. 700 remaining feet of giant steel columns, among the strongest ever erected. What force acts upon the core to make it all of a sudden disappear? Professor David Ray Griffin is the author of Debunking 9/11 Debunking. Prior to his extensive research on 9/11, he wrote books in many fields, including the philosophy of science.
For a believable theory about the Twin Towers, we must explain why these buildings, given the particular way they were constructed, came down as they did. Each building was supported by 287 steel columns. These columns ran from the basements through the roofs, and yet they ended up in a pile of rubble with most of the steel in pieces 25 to 50 feet long. This could happen only if these columns were sliced by some very powerful kind of energy. The towers came straight down, which could happen only if the columns at each level were sliced simultaneously. The buildings also came down at virtually free fall speed, which means the upper floors encountered no resistance from the lower floors. This could happen only by very powerful explosives set to go off in a particular order. The fact that the steel was sliced, the concrete pulverized, and the buildings came down at nearly free fall speed can be explained only in terms of forces much more powerful than the combination of fire and gravity.
This is a pancake collapse. Why don't we see piles of floors at ground zero? And paper blown everywhere. Wouldn't a pancake collapse have trapped the contents inside? What blew this paper all over New York? If you were to drop a billiard ball from the top of the Twin Towers, it would hit the ground in just over 9 seconds, the average time it took for the towers to fall. Helped by gravity and falling through air, the ball will gain speed. The calculation for a pancake collapse of 110 stories, with each floor pulverizing to get out of the way, is 96 seconds. In the real world, with the floors creating resistance, how would a pancake collapse occur in 9+ seconds, as fast as a ball falls through air? The airplane struck the towers high above the ground. But down in the lobby of the North Tower, marble facing flew off the walls. The windows shattered, all the glass blown out.
Can you tell them it's okay? Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. We ran just a little bit. That was really interesting. It was really beautifully put together. We ran a little bit over. I would like to watch it all. How long is it in total?
90 minutes.
90 minutes of very well put together information. And it is very interesting, and you didn't even get into building number 7 that came down and it never was hit by an airplane at all.
We do talk about it.
You do in the
yeah.
but in this segment, I mean, we didn't get a chance to.
No, this is just one of the introductory segments to
Uh-huh.
the whole subject of building collapses.
Yeah.
In the beginning of the segment, you're looking at controlled demolitions.
Uh-huh.
You know, the normal implosion style demolitions, and you see all the jets of concrete, the puffs, the flashes, and these same elements appeared in the destruction of the Twin Towers.
It's a little hard to know how to deal with the citizens, because we're in a period now, and you can take all these things together and you can put together a narrative that is very disquieting, that there may have been involvement on the part of people within the United States government, much like I remember when first I saw David Ray Griffin at one of the meetings there, and I went right home and got down William Shire's Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which is a definitive, I took a course at university on that book at a long time, back in the long before I like to remember, but way back, and I got it down, and it does seem that the Nazi Party were involved and certainly took advantage of the burning of the Reichstag in 1933 Germany in order to set up a context of fear and set up a fascist system that was able to successfully establish itself in Germany. There are people who make this kind of an allegation around this. On the other hand, if I may, I see figures where there are people, again, back to your theme, where you're saying if people are invited rather than hit over the head with an already assumed assumption about who the bad guys are or something like that, like a Western film or something, if they're invited, I've seen statistics that there's something like 60 to 70% of the people of the United States, or was it New York, I'm not sure, would like to see there be a new investigation of the 9/11 events, which is a very strong and high percentage of people who would like to have it investigated without the assumption of who's right and wrong and that sort of thing, just to have it reinvestigated because there's so many unanswered questions and mysteries in the minds of the general citizenry without the prima facie assumption of guilt anywhere or anything of that sort of thing. Does that jive with your sense of the reality, and is that an important statistic if that is the case?
Well, we do need to look at this all over again and certainly have an investigation and an examination even that, I don't know how it can be done now, but the steel, if you will remember, the remains of the towers were carted off very, very fast.
There must be a lot remain, though.
No, it was all shipped off to foreign countries and sold as scrap.
Every last little bit of steel?
There's a couple of pieces in these memorials.
In a museum somewhere or something?
Yeah, but they're very, off bounds.
Yeah, that's one of the conundrums. Yeah, okay.
And it's not a conundrum. It's that in itself is a absolutely gross, violation of crime scene protocol. Why do you remove all the evidence?
Yeah, right. That's one thing.
And that was a national order. That came straight from the government.
We had the 9/11 Commission that gave a report, just like we have these things, and there's a great deal, if those figures, 60, 70% of the citizenry, that's not just 9/11 activists or something of that sort, that's the citizenry thinks that there should be another independent investigation of the whole thing, bespeaks a distrust of the official record that's been put forth by the people representing the mainline institutions of our society, no?
Absolutely.
And it is relevant, and it's to those people that go off into Walmart and to Borders and to places like that who might be able to be very interested in your 9/11 Mysteries DVD, if I might suggest.
Well, I hope that they'll see it there. I mean, it's, this has to be done by word of mouth.
Right.
You have to be telling your friends. I have to be telling my friends. I made a movie. There are many tools available. I have a little postcard, the Independent Thinkers 9/11 fact sheet.
Yes, I have that.
Popular,
thank you. I've got it in my wallet. I keep it. Yeah.
Right. Well, I can provide people with, many copies of those cards that they can hand out. I sell them on my website, 911mysteries.com.
Yeah.
And you can acquire postcards and other little tools. You can make your own flyers. But this needs to be the #1 subject of discussion in this country. Not what did you do last night and are you planning a vacation and how's little Johnny? We have to start talking about things that are not talked about, or else our lives are going to disappear. The machine, this manipulative, exploitive, very destructive machine that is apparently running our world, is going to crunch us up in its jaws.
Is it the same machine that has run the world since the beginning of time?
I believe it's probably dynastic, yes.
Yeah. It goes back to pre-dynastic, I would say, with the Caligula was pretty much in authority, and the emperors of Rome, and back in times it's been mostly a few group of people who would run things, and it still continues that way, and the people are led around like sheep or coerced by and large. The serfs on an estate of a feudal lord didn't have much to say. If the duke lost the estate in a crap game, the serfs went along like so many cattle. And that's the way it's been throughout history. James Joyce said history is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken. President Carter, I saw on television the other day saying, do we live in a just world, if we're talking about just in terms of the people? And he said, of course not. We do not. So we're on the verge of where we're in a time of questioning. But the question I come back to with that statistic of the population, you don't necessarily say we've got to, like a prosecutor says, we have a case, and here's the facts, ma'am, and that kind of thing. It's just the idea, because that statistic is they think there should be an independent investigation. Just, you know, we're just going to investigate it. It isn't that we have an agenda or something like that, or a political agenda or something like that. So much of that could be put into the realm of political spin or advantage or something, but just the idea that there's enough there, the mysteries are sufficient that there should be another investigation of the facts of the case, and that's enough to get the ball rolling, perhaps, in terms of a broad general looking at that, and then the issues about how the society is organized might be able to be informed from what is found by that kind of a stance by the people of the country, something along those lines?
I honestly can't say. If there is an investigation, who's going to do it? Who's going to bring the hammer down on who? You know, this is the whole question. But there has to be a large body of the public that is informed.
60-70%.
Yes, but Harold, I think those are the people who just generally are not, you know, not convinced that we got any good look at 9/11.
Yeah, but that's a large percentage of people who, and it may be without going into the facts
yes,
or
but
in
those
the
people
charges.
don't know. They don't know this material. They don't know my movie or anyone else's 9/11 movie. Those are just simply that's a broad cross-section. Those are not necessarily informed people.
Right.
But it's great that they're there.
I think so.
If we could just inform people, if we could get those people to watch these videos, we would have a much stronger voice.
You think so, yeah?
Well, of course.
Yeah. Well, maybe. I'm not so sure. What you'd like to be, the question of if there was to be an investigation, there's enough there, Lord knows. If there was to be, who would do it?
That's it. That's what I want to know.
How do you do that, and that kind of thing? It's a broad question, and there are larger issues that are concerned. And I'm not so sure that the idea of more and more facts and that kind of stuff is what's going to get. Just the idea.
No, Harold, not more and more facts.
Or more.
More people knowing about these facts.
Okay.
You're definitely going to see a wave, a powerful wave, when millions and millions and millions of people wake
worldwide,
up to this.
Perhaps, yeah. And your video's getting around the world now, too.
Here is where we need it.
Okay.
We don't need it in Japan and Australia. Those people, they don't live here. This is where 9/11 happened.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of the rest of the world already knows this. And they're waiting for Americans to know it.
Okay. Now,
That's
what
the
is it,
issue.
if they were to know it, what is it that they would know, let's say, other than some of the facts that you're talking about? But what would they know, and what is it that is so... Goebbels used to say, if you're going to lie to the people, lie big, the big lie. It's easier to put a big lie over, or a big thing, than little things, you know, that kind of thing. What would be the big major premise that would be perhaps want to be put forth by the people who see that there's an important for us to focus on these issues that you focused on in the film?
I don't understand your question.
What is the major premise behind that? It seems to me it would be there is a major premise behind much of what's done is that there was involvement by the United States government.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
I would say
that's what I want. That's what I want to avoid. Okay.
9/11 was a false flag operation.
Okay. A lot of people won't know what that means.
Then we have to define it.
Yeah.
They have to educate themselves.
Why don't you do it right now?
False flag means, well, you think of flag, right?
Yes, right.
Something happens and it's blamed on one country when it's in fact executed by another country.
It's happened a lot. Yeah.
Simply put, that's a false flag operation. State-sponsored terror.
Yeah. And that's the kind of thing. Gulf of Tonkin comes to mind, the burning of the Maine, Reichstag, that kind of thing. Yeah, and they're doing that. And there's a lot of that going on in order to get a narrative by which people can assume power and so forth. But there is, in a certain sense...
Really, in order to go to war, that, you know, false flag operations are pretexts, typically pretexts for countries to launch wars against other countries who are being blamed. War is a profit-making endeavor.
It is.
War
yeah.
paralyzes societies. People don't expand in wartime. They contract their activities and their hopes and their dreams. They live in fear, and they're very much more easily governed, controlled, told what to do.
Yeah.
You know, lights out, it's
Rationing.
blackout and rationing and all these, the repeal
Patriot
of
Acts and whatnot.
civil rights. We're all going to get national ID cards, and
We don't need no
rat on
stinking
each other, report suspicious activity.
Yeah.
In other words, be suspicious
Tips,
of everyone.
Yeah, right.
Which
And
is not a good way to live.
no, it's not. And people and to create fear, create fear by a false flag notion and with often with lies, and you create a context and repeat it over and over and over and over and over, and then people come to accept it as reality, that sort of thing. And you keep them very fear, and people will probably through long experience throughout the human condition will flock to authority that's going to protect them when the barbarian is at the gate.
Right.
That's the thing that they can refer to in order to keep power for a certain group of people who perhaps lack the vision that able to have the citizens be led by their good example and by their vision. They don't have a vision or a sufficient way in which things are going to be done at an existentially crucial moment in the evolution of consciousness, or the evolution of patterns. They don't have a vision, and so they have to resort to these kind of tactics in order to hold on to power. Is that a major thesis or premise?
You're talking so fast, Harold, I
I'm
can barely
sorry.
follow.
Oh.
But I would say yes.
Okay.
If you think so, yes.
Well, I just think that it would be better if they had a vision. Mr. Carter said we don't live in a world of justice, and the trends are not there. They're all set up, the systems are set up to benefit those who are already powerful, and they don't have a system that's going to serve what the future requires for the whole of the human society with an ecologically proper context of organization. They don't have the vision to lead by example and by right lights, as it were. So then they have to resort to these kind of conditions in order to keep power, to maintain a system that has not got the vision that the future requires.
I think it's very easy for us to move out of fear and create our own world ourselves.
Okay, yeah, the people.
Yes, and when Mr. Carter says it's not a just world,
Or the trends.
I don't want people, my hope is that people will not become further paralyzed by that.
They should be.
I'm too small to do anything. I'm helpless. I'm only one person. I live in Alabama or wherever, you know. People can't see themselves as limited beings because they're not.
Yeah, we should empower rather than disempower.
We should understand that we have potential, and the first step we take in that direction is a gain in that direction. And then we can take the second step and the third step.
And I
we can
submit,
keep
if I may,
going.
and one of the problems is in this universe is you run out of time along the time-space continuum, and we run out of time for this segment. I'm really sorry. I want to thank you really very much for a very important DVD that you put together, and sorry we could go on talking for hours and everything. It's your pleasure to have the perceptions of Sofia, and she's Sofia. She has another...